design, the requirements capture, classical project, right? Um, you, I mean, even Gautam, in your case, right? Like you give out an RFP, right? And companies out there look at that thing, and especially if it's a custom development, right? So they look at it from this thing, have one or two calls, understand the requirements. Karthik, we do that day in, day out, right? One customer call, two customer call, $100 million proposal is ready. Okay. So what happens is, how deeply we are using a technology, like whether it is going to be I'm buying that and installing it on prem, or using it as a cloud service, or using it as a SaaS. I really know the impact of the effort only after I have started my requirements and some phases of my development is through. But by that time, all the legal agreements are completed, and the clause of minimum service and all is there. Now, when the reality of how long does it actually take, like let's say even if it's an open source product, right? And I have to now take the open source and fix a bug in that. It will probably take me 3 months for somebody to just understand that code and just do that minor fix. So even if the vendor, so in the vendor agreement say, in case we go out of business, we will give you the source code. What will I do with your source code? I don't even know how to open, click and compile it. Okay, so this I'll give you a manual also. We know how well the manual works. So from a procurement perspective, right, all source code and things will be handed to us. But architects don't get involved at that point in time. We don't get involved in that process. So I think I'm just curious, if you had to do something, right, to handle this in your projects, what are your ideas on how you could deal with a scenario like this? And Nishanth, I guess in your cases, you might be working with products which are already in service, running for a long time.
Yeah.
So how would you, what could
Yeah,
you
yeah. The one thing that I was just thinking, like, let's say the case of an example of a Confluence. Okay, Confluence
the
things,
WordPress
and
wikis?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
wikis. So we have two options. One is the Confluence and the cloud service. Other one is the Confluence we can deploy in our own data center. So in considering this BCP issue, so which one we should choose? Like, say if that SaaS service has some, they assume they stop the service all on a sudden, and by that time say we have enormous amount of data feeded in that Confluence, then what will happen to that data? So if we have a choice of that, even in that situation itself, we should have a very clear understanding or clear points on all these aspects, including the legal and the legal aspects. The BCP has to be considered even for a choice between this simple even for. I don't say it's a simple thing, because data is the ultimate value in any product, because
Correct.
data has the more value things. So because why I mentioned this point, like we have these two options in right now in our product, like for an external portal, like for the customers who is accessing our data, or accessing the details of our API from outside IBS, they have to, we have document all those things in a cloud, which sorry, in a Confluence which is hosted in a cloud, means the SaaS service.
Okay.
I mean the SaaS model, and the for all the internal things we have an internal on-prem Confluence deployment. So what I was thinking is, like, say suddenly if they stop that SaaS service, what will happen to that? All the vendors will be in trouble, even including us and the consumers also.
That's so basically, at least in your case, right, you have experience of uh, installing, deploying, and running something on prem.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, like let's say things like let's say there's a product like SharePoint. Okay.
Hmm.
So SharePoint, I could do it on prem or on the cloud. Now,
Yeah.
I started by using it on the cloud only. Okay, so
Okay.
now my team from an infrastructure level down to
Yeah,
the
and
app.
Kumaran, just saying, you said like you started using the cloud itself. Have you ever thought of this point at that time? Like what would
No,
happen?
that's what that's the point I'm getting to. Let's say I started off the technology in the cloud itself. My team got formed. Everybody decided to use SharePoint on the cloud.
Okay,
That's their exposure to SharePoint itself, right?
okay,
And when they start from there, even though there is an option of doing it on prem,
mm,
my team doesn't have the expertise for it.
okay,
So I was just wondering, probably in the BCP,
mm,
and it is also related to the legal agreements that is entered, I would need to have two things. So BCP is for my internal consumption, my business stakeholders. So in that,
correct.
one will be about what you kindly pointed out, could be the data, things around the data. How will I
Yeah,
get the data? When you will get it? What's the minimum data that I would get?
yeah,
Probably the other thing also I need to kind of put in the BCP is, we need to recruit three more guys who are in infrastructure. It will cost me so much time to train them, and hence if this goes down, I would need 6 months before I can get the service up. Probably I think we, at some point as architect, we should go back and revise the BCP and communicate to the business, and probably bubble it up through the procurement to the vendor.
yeah,
So I
So let me give you an example of car manufacturing, right? So 80% of the components which are used in manufacturing, they are standardized components, right? So it is very easy for them to source it from multiple vendors or multiple partners, right?
correct.
So that makes their production of the car very reliable, so they can produce it. The third parties, there is aftermarket support. You cannot get Maruti parts. You get it from a third party where they make compatible parts. They have licensed out the design. So because that market has matured a lot, that is possible today, right?
Hmm.
So in software, there is everything seems to be bespoke. It's like written for you and only you, and there is nothing else, right? And that is what actually is uh, proving that the cloud vendors are being more successful, because they are able to bring that nut bolt kind of reliability into bases, and you don't need so much customization. We give you the standard stuff that will take care of your 80-90%. You use today if you want just a word processor, you can use Google, you can use free version of Word. So many things that covers 80-90% of average use, right? It's a nuts and bolts thing. Nobody will write a word processor for you anymore, right? Why would you really need a word processor when there are at least three or four standard word processors available off the shelf? There is no need for you, right? So that is where the reliability part has to be thought of by architects. Can you use components which are off the shelf, straight away, nuts and bolts, very well understood, given by 10 different vendors? I can just swap one for the other without blinking an eyelid, right? So that is the, I'm of course I'm painting a utopian scenario, but that is the sort of thing which will make software more reliable than more, the fragile it is today.
That's kind of interesting, right? It comes to our pet topic of anti-fragile, right? Rather than avoiding failure, how do you handle a failure? So I think in manufacturing they would have that, like they will, if I have to get 50 units of a wheel, they'll actually get 20 from one vendor and 30 from another vendor. So they'll keep both alive. So in our case, like let's take facial recognition itself, right? Two calls will go to IVM and two calls will go to let's say Microsoft, and one to Google. So my application is designed to handle all the three. That would be an ideal state. right? So if just one goes down, I just
So
increase the load
actually,
to.
I see some parallels in this, right? So there is so this compatible APIs, right? Where what is inside the box, I really don't care as long as I can talk through the API, right? So that is the kind of interchangeability I'm talking about, right? If I can talk to that API, I don't really care whether you are IBM or Microsoft. You can talk to all I want is I'll give you some data, you'll throw me some data, give me an answer, match, not match. I don't care what you really do, right? This is my API. As long as you will write to this API or talk to me on this standard format, I don't really care what your inside technology is, right?
Yeah, I think the challenge there, I mean, I have had the same struggle when you're using an existing framework, right? And I had a talk with my lead, and he said, look, Kumaran, for every single API, for every single parameter, if I am going to think of an abstraction on top of that, right, I am going in for a third party service to reduce time to market and effort. So if I have 50 APIs and 10 parameters, and I'm going to write a wrapper around that, that will probably take me a month to do it. And we have only some ordinary or little limited set of developer resource. So it's that has to be the pros and cons of, how much you want to give out needs to be weighed out. But your
Uh,
option is definitely there, correct?
Maybe that's where we'll come closer to having real interchangeability, right? This is I don't really
I,
care.
I think probably it needs to then get weighed in with the service that you are using, how critical it is to the business or how much core you go. So the more core it is, then you have a wrapper around that. And so that is something you do an additional costing for it, right? And obviously it will not be in the project cost. So for example, like especially in either as a like Gowtham, your case, right? Getting an RFP or Cognizant is this thing, right? Now, I don't, let's say I'm a services company. Now, it is not my problem to see how the switch is going to happen, right? As long as I meet your RFP need, my job is done. I'm not going to increase my expenditure by laying 2 layers of abstraction on top of that. Okay, so it becomes a little tricky scenario in that, because now I try to make it generic. It's going to increase the cost, and I will lose the RFP because I'm not L1 anymore.
And you will lose the vendor lock-in.
Yeah, Kumaran, just one more point. If we considering this criticality of that use case
Yeah.
or the particular case where we are consuming an API of a particular SaaS provider. For
Mm,
example, in our case, for some airlines actually, in our product is integrated with payment service providers, payment gateways.
right.
So some airlines actually have contract with multiple payment service providers, and even they have asked for one vendor. We have implemented it's like say transaction routing, like 30% transaction has to route to one
Oh,
gateway
okay.
and
Okay.
70% to other. So what happens is if we really look at this scenario, like BCP, say if all on a sudden one service provider has stopped the they have stopped the service, they don't have any downtime, right? What we have to do
Correct.
is just change to 100% configuration, means all the transactions will be routed to another one.
That's interesting. Okay, so that 70/30, I mean, whatever that ratio is that based on some technical requirement or a business need? What is that percentage?
It was a business need.
It was a business need. Okay. So that's
and
This is
and
where the
that business
business.
that business need has handled using a technical things at our side, that the product side.
got it. Super.
I think this is. I think the architects would have thought about it before they actually went for that solution. That we need to provide
Yeah,
this uh, business continuity, because business also consider this, that we cannot rely only on one payment provider.